Okay, so today we're going to go over parts of speech, and more specifically, I'm going to go over subjects, verbs, and prepositions. So the goal of this presentation is to help give you a better understanding of how we use the words in our sentences. And that should give you some more freedom, hopefully, when you revise your sentences to make them a little bit simpler and a little bit easier for people to understand and read in general. Today, we're going to talk about 7 parts of speech, but mostly we're going to go into a little bit more detail on the first 4. But I just want everybody to have a quick overview of the main ones. So we have nouns, which you've probably heard before. They constitute a person, place, thing, or idea. We have pronouns. They help us avoid repetition and can take the place of a person, place, or thing, or of a noun. Verbs are action words or states of being. Prepositions are words that begin phrases and indicate relationships, and we'll see some examples of that. Conjunctions, these are words like your fanboys or for and nor but or yet so. They can help us join words and ideas together and even help us join 2 complete sentences together if we use a comma in one of the fanboys. Adjectives modify or describe a noun. We'll probably go into more detail into adjectives in a future lesson. And adverbs modify or describe a verb, adjective, or other adverb. And these are typically your words that end in ly. So a quick tip, what do we really need to know, at least today? Because there's a lot we could get into, but just to try to simplify things, I want to try to give you the most important things that you need to know. So first of all, most sentences follow a similar format. Not all do this. There are going to be some exceptions, particularly with when you ask questions, but most sentences follow a subject, verb, object format. And there are going to be occasions where some sentences like commands don't have subjects, but almost all will have these, at least a subject and a verb. So if you look at the sentence below that, this is your typical sentence, something like Sarah sent a letter to John. Now, in this example, we have a subject, Sarah, we have the verb, sent, and then an object, which is a letter, what was sent. So the object is the thing getting done, something done to it. Okay, and then we have another object in this sentence. Sarah sent a letter to John. He's part of what's called a preposition here, and so he's also an object. So he's not the subject, he's not doing the action. So in this example, Sarah is the subject, just Sarah. Number 2, implied or explicit. All sentences need a subject and a verb. And now this just should make sense to us. In order to write about something, we really ought to have something to talk about, a subject, and we really ought to have something to say about that subject, which would be our predicate or our verb. Okay, so nouns and subjects. So something you want to know is that while all subjects are nouns, not all nouns are subjects. So just like we noted above before, Sarah sent a letter to John. We have 3 nouns, Sarah, letter, and John, but only one of them is a subject because only one of them is doing the action, and that's Sarah because she's sending the letter. So we also want to know is that you can have more than one subject in a sentence. This is called a compound subject. So I've given an example of this as well. Sarah and John ate ice cream. In this sentence, the verb is ate, and both Sarah and John are eating the ice cream, so they're both doing the action. And then lastly, a subject can be an idea or group of words acting as a noun together. So this one's a little bit trickier to see, but I've underlined the subject, which is finding true love, and the verb is was. So finding true love was not challenging for Sarah and John. And so in this case, Sarah and John are not the subject of the sentence. And we can see we're still following that pattern of subject, verb, and then the object. Okay, so I don't want to go too in-depth on pronouns, but pronouns take the place of nouns. You'll see that there are some pronouns that we use when they are the subject of a sentence, and there are some pronouns that we use when they are the object of a sentence. So I've put a list here just so you can see some examples of subject pronouns, object pronouns, and then we have words like possessive pronouns, relative pronouns, which sometimes start what are called dependent clauses. And we'll learn more about these later, and demonstrative pronouns such as this, these, that, and those. I just wanted to introduce you to some examples of pronouns, but for the most part, these follow the same rules as nouns do, And sometimes you'll use the subject pronoun when it is the subject of a sentence, and sometimes you'll use the object pronoun when it's the object of the sentence. So this is that reason why you would sometimes use who versus whom. When it's a subject, like who is going to the party on Saturday, you use who. And when it's the object, with whom are you going to the party, where you is the subject and are going is the verb, you would use whom because it's not the subject of the sentence. Verbs, they are the magic of the sentence. A sentence's verbs tell the reader what the subject is, does, did, or will do. And there are 3 types of verbs. We have action verbs like birds chirp. In the example, Jake threw the ball. Threw would be the action verb. We have linking verbs. These are words that link ideas or define a term. For example, the day is hot. The day just is hot, so it's defining the day. And we have helping verbs. And so helping verbs help a main verb. So you'll always see these connected with another verb, and they can help you change the tense of the sentence. So here's the example I've given. I have read your article, and you can tell by the sentence the person is subtly changing when they read the article. So if I were to respond to someone and say, did you even read the article I sent you? And they respond, I have read your article. If they actually read the article before they criticized it or maybe wrote to me about it, then they would have said, I read the article. And so I have read the article subtly changes the meaning of the sentence potentially. Some quick tips for verbs. Just like subjects, you can have more than one verb or verb phrase in a sentence, and this is called a compound verb. So in the example below, Sarah and John ate ice cream and went ice skating. So Sarah and John both ate and went, and you can see how they're connected with a conjunction and. Another note is that forms of the word to be are always, yes, always verbs. These are words like am, are, is, was, were, has, and have. And in fact, I actually would really like everybody to pause this and repeat that over and over and over again. So generally speaking, you should try to memorize that list of words. It should just come off the tongue easily. Am, are, is, was, were, has, have. You should just be able to say it pretty freely and practice that so that it becomes comfortable and is just committed to memory. We also want to know that all words ending in ing need a helping verb to be part of the verb of a sentence. So in the example below, the sun is rising on the horizon. Is rising is okay as a verb, but if you didn't see the helping verb is there, if I just said something like rising on the horizon, comma, the sun was bright orange, the verb would not be rising on the horizon in that sentence. And lastly, a verb cannot take the infinitive form. So this is whenever you see the word to in front of a verb. So in the example below, I want to eat pizza. To eat is not the verb of the sentence. The verb is actually want. Okay, so I wanted to introduce you to prepositional phrases. And off to the right, you'll see a picture of my cat, Coffee, and she's standing on a bunch of pages and papers, and she's standing in a bookshelf with a ton of books. And so think of your prepositions as, again, they're words that indicate relationships, and they often they follow a pattern. So they start with a prepositional word, and they end with an object or a noun. And so that together constitutes what's called a prepositional phrase. And so a preposition will never contain the subject and a verb, and that's why it's important to note, because they can help us actually simplify our sentences and clarify our sentences. So in this example, as you see my cat, we can create a couple of prepositions just looking at the picture. So we could say that my cat is near the microphone. We could say that it's on the bookshelf. We can say that she's beneath my Shakespeare book. We can say that she's above the drawers. And we can also say if she drops my microphone, that she's in trouble. And another quick trick for this is you can remember the famous nursery rhyme, over the river and through the woods to grandmother's house. All of those are prepositions. Okay, so here is a list of prepositional words. There are quite a lot of them. You can memorize some of them, but you actually don't need to memorize all of them. Once you sort of memorize, I would say about maybe 15 of them, you start to kind of get a handle on them, and you can identify them pretty easily when looking at a sentence without having to commit all of these specifically to memory. But I would recommend printing out a list for yourself, or maybe printing out a screenshot of this page so that you can go back and study these and memorize these and practice these frequently. Okay, lastly, I want to give a few tips for identifying subjects and verbs. So you actually want to identify them backwards in the opposite way we've learned about them today. So first, you want to identify prepositions because they will never contain the subject or the verb. Then you want to find the verb of a sentence, or the verbs if there are more than one. And then you want to find the corresponding nouns, or noun clause or noun phrase, the corresponding subjects, so the things doing the verb. So let's do a little bit of practice with this. So in example 1, we have the following sentence. A few slices of pizza are in the fridge. So what should we do? Well, first we should locate and eliminate all prepositions. So you might want to pause at each step so that you can practice. So pause here and see if you can identify the prepositions. Okay, so if you've identified the prepositions, you should have noted that of pizza is a preposition and in the fridge is a preposition. And so they begin with those prepositional words and they end with an object or a noun. So that means that neither of these contain the subject or the verb. Okay, so the next step is to find the verb. And I've identified the verb here in purple, but sometimes I'll underline it twice to signal where the verb is in the sentence. So pause here and see if you can find the verbs in the sentence. Okay, so the verb is are, and if you recall, it's from that list I told you we should memorize. The am, are, is, was, were, has, and have. Those words are always, yes, always verbs, 100% of the time. You don't even have to read the sentence to be able to identify that those are verbs. Okay, and so step 3, find the subject, which is usually to the left of the verb. Not always, but most of the time you'll find that the subject is to the left of the verb. So pause the video really quickly and see if you can find the subject. Okay, great. So we eliminated of pizza, we eliminated in the fridge, so this only left a few options for us. It was either a few, or slices, and in this case it was slices. Okay, example 2, find the subject and the verb. So you might pause it here and see if you can go through those 3 steps on your own, but I'll go through them in just a moment so that you can see if you got the answer right. Okay, so step 1 is to locate and eliminate all the prepositions. So here we had 2 prepositions. We had before class and we had of coffee. Quick note, not all sentences will have prepositions, but if they do, you can just get rid of them because they will never contain the subject or the verb. Okay, so next we want to find the verb. So here, the verb of the sentence is drink. Step 3, look left, find the subject. Okay, so here I'm able to identify that the subject is I, which is really the only noun left after we've gotten rid of before class. So hopefully you can see how that works. And now identifying subjects and verbs, you'll find pretty easy.